Before we begin, I do want to mention that I have read the Lightning Thief book, which is the book that this show is based on, the first one. I am going to draw some comparisons in order to emphasize some of my points of criticism. However, I will still not spoil anything beyond what is shown in the trailers. Okay, I'll be honest, I was looking forward to this show. There are only so many franchises that really stick out when I think of my childhood. The two franchises that I remember enjoying the most as a kid were Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. The books that were released for both of these franchises were really what got me invested in them. Percy Jackson has had a few movie adaptations in the past, and I have seen these movies, but that was a really long time ago, and honestly, I don't remember them at all. What I do remember, however, are the books, especially the first one that I read over and over again when I was a kid. I really loved this franchise, so when this show was announced, I was looking forward to it, but I was also a little scared of how it would turn out, considering that it was once again another Disney show, and I think we all know how those are going nowadays. So Percy Jackson and the Olympians focuses on a kid named Percy who is having difficulties in life. He's being thrown from one school to another as his mom is doing her best in trying to find the right place for him due to his learning difficulties and overall difficulties in adapting to his life. However, Percy starts discovering that the world of regular humans isn't actually the world he belongs in, and that everything his mom has told him about the Greek mythology, the Olympians, the monsters and creatures are actually real, and that Percy is actually a demigod himself. As he gets into a camp with other people like him, he shortly finds out that Zeus's master bolt has been stolen, and the god of sky and thunder is threatening to start a full-scale war with other gods if his bolt isn't found and returned to him by the summer solstice. It happens so that Percy is the one that Zeus suspects to have stolen the bolt, so Percy and his friends Annabeth and Grover are sent on a quest to find and retrieve the bolt to Zeus in order to avoid the war and clear his own name. Well, the show is out and I have very mixed opinions on it. For a modern Disney show, yeah, it's alright. It definitely is quite a faithful adaptation in terms of the overarching storyline. They don't change any significant plot points, which I was really happy about. The execution, however, is what drags down my enjoyment of this show by a little bit, and we'll get into that in just a second. I do want to get out the positives first though. Let's start with the acting. The main characters are all quite young, and of course it's hard to expect a masterful performance from them. However, I was still quite surprised at how good the acting is. Especially Percy's actor really nails how the character behaves in the source material. He's naive, a little clueless, but overall a heavy-hearted kid who cares about the people around him while wanting to prove his worthiness to the gods while exploring his own relationship with his father. As for his sidekicks, Annabeth and Grover, their actors also do a good job, even if I have some not so positive things to say about how the characters were handled by the script, but I don't feel like that's the actors' fault by any means. The adult cast is pretty solid as well, but I did want to focus on the child actors as they are of course in the spotlight. So yeah, good job there. Overall, the show is pretty well shot and effects and cinematics definitely aren't the worst out there. I didn't really have any issues with that. I was also happy to see that pretty much every important character from the book is included here as well. They don't cut out any major parts, all of the big scenes that I remember from the book are included. Now here's where I want to express the complaints I have for this show, because even if there is a solid groundwork laid here, the execution is mostly flawed. To avoid spoilers, like I promised I would, I am not going to do any kind of a direct book to TV scene comparison, but I will speak about how majority of the scenes differ from their source material. So don't worry, no spoilers incoming, I will just speak on a general level. In the vast majority of the scenes, the biggest problem for me personally is that there seems to be no surprise factor whatsoever for the main characters. Let me tell you what I mean by this. So imagine this. The main trio walks into another scene where they meet a new character. In the books, the reader starts to slowly suspect that there is something suspicious going on there, but the main characters don't realize it right away. But even they start to slowly suspect that something's wrong as the tension starts to build. Then of course when the tension has risen high enough, shit hits the fan and they have to figure out how they can get out of the situation and defeat whoever is trying to stop them on their quest. This is a very normal type to make scenes play out and it works well. However, in the show, the main characters just seem to know everything that's going to happen before it even happens. They walk into a scene, one of them instantly lets the others know that, hey, this character we just met is a monster from the Greek mythology or a god or something, and then everybody knows what's going on right off the bat, without the show giving any time to build up any kind of tension or mystery for the viewer. This happens in almost every major scene in the show, and it just undermines everything that's going to happen. The way this show handles its characters is also, well, not the worst, still pretty disappointing at times. I did talk about Percy a bit there earlier, so I'm not gonna dive into that too much here. But I do want to focus on the other two. So let's start with Grover. I was actually surprised that they included like Grover's backstory and all that. I really thought they were just gonna skip it. They do dedicate some time to his reasons for being on the quest with the others, and I was really happy to see that. Annabeth, however, they just completely fumbled. In the book, Annabeth is a really interesting character with a neat backstory. Her relationship with her mother, everything that went on in her old home with her dad, those important factors in making her character, well, an actual character. In this show, most of that is completely skipped. The only backstory we really get out of her is pretty much there because the audience needs to understand another character whose backstory is heavily tied to Annabeth's backstory. It's disappointing because it feels like Annabeth is there only because she needs to be there. She isn't interesting in the slightest, she just walks around with the other characters as a plot device that sometimes explains some parts of the world, like tells everyone who they are up against next before the show gets to naturally get that over to the viewer. I also have to mention the lack of action scenes. And before you say anything, no, I don't think that every good piece of media needs to consist only of action scenes. If it was done well here, I wouldn't give a flying fuck if it didn't have any action scenes at all. However, the thing is that, first of all, the book has way more action scenes that fit well into the narrative, and second of all, the show tries to build action scenes but never really goes through with them, so the viewer is kinda just left there wondering where the action scene that was supposed to happen went. It's like they cut these scenes out that they were so heavily building up to, or even more commonly, they just play out this awkward 5-second scene where Percy stabs someone with a sword and runs away or something. I get it, the main characters are children. Would it make a lot of sense if they fought and won against these monsters? But that's kind of what happens in the source material, and it also happens in the show, they just don't really want to show it. I think this show is heavily affected by Disney's modern, extremely broken style of producing TV shows. At least this show has a grand total of 8 episodes instead of the usual 6, but the episodes are still very short, like half an hour tops. The show's pacing is a bit all over the place, and it feels rushed at times. They wanted to cover pretty much all scenes in the book, which I appreciate, but maybe leaving out a few of them and instead spending more time with the other ones would have been a better choice. Or better yet, just have more episodes. And make the episodes longer as well. Seriously, why can't they be like normal length? In conclusion, Percy Jackson isn't the worst adaptation out there. It does some things well, but it does leave me a little frustrated because I know it could have been so much more. If they ever make a season 2 for the show, I'm willing to give it a try, but I hope that by then, Disney has figured out how to produce TV shows and also the writers have learned how to can do proper justice to all of the key characters. I do recommend the show if you really are interested in it, but if you have the patience and the possibility to do so, please just read the book. It's easily still to this day the best way to experience the story.